Welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us this morning or afternoon, wherever, or evening, I guess, wherever you are in the world. We're excited to have you join us today. We have a kind of pretty rich conversation set on a very important and very boring, I will admit, topic. Earlier this summer, our team released what we're calling the Carbon Credit Data Framework. And so we're going to focus on kind of what the framework is and how it works to bring greater clarity to the pretty chaotic and sometimes frustrating but important space of carbon crediting data. So maybe just a little quick background. We started this work just over 2 years ago, and it was really meant to be an ambitious effort to bring greater transparency to the voluntary carbon market, and especially to kind of the project level data that is so important to climate impact. Our goal was to define, organize, and then standardize the full universe of data that could demonstrate how all types of carbon projects are designed, whether they're performing as expected, and why they should or should not be trusted as a valued climate solution. Kind of the underlying theory of this vision was based off knowledge that trusted and efficient markets of all types, coffee markets, car markets, carbon crediting markets, need data transparency and data efficiency to best assess risk, uncertainty, quality, and price, all things and topics in the voluntary market that are the source of a lot of debates and frustrations. But before markets can do that, markets need to be able to understand what information can possibly be known about the commodity or product in question. And so, as you all know, the voluntary carbon market is a very dynamic and very innovative space. But we have learned kind of in our extensive research and continued work that core question, what information can projects describe or should they be able to provide, is something that all market actors struggle with. And so that was actually the question that led us to create this carbon crediting data framework. And so earlier this year I mentioned, and we'll share these links throughout the webinar, we released what we're calling the Carbon Credit Data Framework Toolkit, which is kind of a full suite of solutions to take this framework, answer that question of what is the full breadth and depth of data that can be used for a carbon crediting project, and then implement it for various stakeholders. So for the next hour or so, Apoorva is going to walk us through kind of how the data framework was designed, how it can be used, how it is being implemented by some kind of market actors, and then what comes next for this work. We are going to record this conversation, and we will share the recording and all the links we reference throughout later this week by email. And we also do have a few questions for you throughout this webinar. So please, we would love to hear your questions and feedback as we go, whether those questions or any others. So please don't be shy, and we're curious for your feedback. With that, Apoorva, I will hand it over to you.
Awesome. Thank you, Caitlin. I hope everyone can hear me all right here. Hello, and a very warm welcome to you from the Carbon Markets team here at RMI. My name is Apoorva Sahai, and I'm so excited to walk you through the journey, the story, and the development behind the Carbon Crediting Data Framework. That is a bit of a mouthful, so I will refer to it as the CCDF during this presentation. Next slide, please. So over the next 35 to 40 minutes, I'll unpack three things. One, why today's voluntary carbon market, or the VCM, struggles under a messy, disjointed data landscape. Number two, how the CCDF provides a practical and a structured way to address that messiness. Number three, what this unlocks for everyone in the market, including many of you here who interact often with carbon credit data and project data. And, we're in September, which officially marks the beginning of fall and events in the climate world. So I will end today's presentation with some upcoming events that we hope you will join us for in the coming weeks. So with that, let's start with the problem that the Carbon Markets Initiative at RMI is solving in the VCM. Next slide. So the VCM needs a reliable data foundation to unlock its full potential as a vehicle for climate finance. And our team here, the Carbon Markets Initiative, is driving that data integrity effort by building data infrastructure and decision frameworks for high impact carbon credit use. In the past year, we've published a foundational VCM landscape guide and a buyer's guide to carbon credit data quality. We've also published other knowledge materials like technical explainers for different credit types, where we share our insights on different quality and risk measures. Next slide. So the VCM's data problem is a, 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 a structural problem. And next slide. Here are some numbers to put things in perspective. The project developers that we've spoken to tell us that they spend over half their time managing duplicative data requests coming in from buyers, from consultants, and data auditors and verifiers. We've heard that buyers can spend a year and a half up to 18 months on due diligence for a single project. Add in legal fees, third-party charges, monitoring costs, and other costs to cover, for example, compliance with environmental and social safeguards. And all of that quickly adds up. And this makes the inefficiency of data exchange in the VCM a very serious question that affects trust and quality in the market. Next slide. It's no surprise that people often describe the VCM as a maze. And this is something our team has heard across multiple interviews and expert consultations and conversations. Whether you're a project developer, a buyer, an investor, or a data provider, one thing is for sure, you're going to run into some data challenges in the VCM. Whether it's limited access to climate impact data that's locked away behind paywalls, or you have difficulty interpreting key measurement data that's tucked away in dense and static PDFs. We've heard a lot in our research, and now we'd love to hear from you. Please take a moment to respond to the poll that should pop up in Zoom. What's your biggest challenge when working with carbon credit data? And as you read through the options, it's perfectly okay to say you're still figuring out where to begin. That's a pretty common challenge in this disjointed VCM landscape. While you're responding, let's talk about the solution that we've been building at CMI for the last 2 years. Next slide. So the CCDF is a toolkit to bring some order to all of that data chaos. It's completely free, open access, and a public good. You can think of the CCDF as a data framework that's super organized to hold information about the hundreds of data points coming out of carbon projects and keep track of it in a systematic way. And why is that useful? The CCDF makes it easier to see what went behind the making of a credit, like the assumptions, the calculations, and all of the project management data. So anyone can compare different projects and start to make quality assessments or risk assessments. We've seen that the market has blind spots that make it hard to spot quality signals. So the CCDF is comprehensive. It has the capacity to capture more than 570 data points about carbon credits, about carbon projects, allowing you to build a rather comprehensive picture of quality. The framework is also designed to play nice with others. It's modular, which means that anyone can plug in their own tools or systems, tweak the data inputs, build on top of it, kind of like Lego blocks for carbon and social environmental data. One thing that's worth clarifying up top is that the CCDF isn't here to define what makes a carbon credit high quality. What it does do is act like a translator for project data and turn it into this common structured language that anyone can understand and then layer on their judgments. Next slide. So we take, this role of translation seriously. Therefore, we've created tools in a couple of different formats to make sure that all kinds of people can actually use it in a way that works best for their needs. So what you see here on the screen are the 4 different formats in which we have publicly released the CCDF. The first 2 formats, the executive report and the implementation spreadsheet, these are largely intended for non-technical users. You might be a sustainability leader or just a curious data provider. Pick up the executive report to understand that big picture, the why and the how of the data framework. Or you might work at a carbon desk in a brokerage, and you need to organize project information across different projects that you're interacting with. So you can pick up the very user-friendly Excel version, and you don't need a technical background for that. On the other side, and now we're looking at number 3 and number 4, if you live in Codeland every day, we've also published a detailed technical documentation and a JSON schema to support the uptake and the software integration. And all of these tools are available in our public GitHub. So we do encourage you to explore and interact with the CCDF using that. Next slide, please. So the development of this wonderful data framework has been an enormous labor of love for our team over the past 2 years. And we absolutely could not have embarked on such a big endeavor without our VCM community, our friends and subject matter experts, and a whole lot of research. So, we obviously wanted to make sure that we are not inventing something in a vacuum. So what you see on the screen here is a quick visual snapshot of the timeline of events from 2023 up to now. We synthesized over 160 resources. We looked at methodologies, safeguards. We looked at best practices in the VCM community. And we've interviewed a whole lot of folks. Over 50 VCM experts have weighed in. And then we spent a good portion iterating through testing the CCDF with a wide range of stakeholders and with our implementation partner, Centigrade. So with that, here's the question: what does the CCDF unlock for people working in carbon markets? And before I answer that question, let's just pause again for a second to hear who's in the room with us today. Please take a second to answer the Zoom poll that again should pop up. What best describes your role in the VCM? Next slide, please. So I don't really need to say this, but as we all know, quality is the most talked about topic in the VCM, and for good reason. It is the hottest topic at any panel. We have passionate debates or sometimes even existential debates about additionality and durability and permanence. And I'm sure each of you have been in interesting conversations through the lens of your own roles and mandates and areas of expertise. The tricky part is, I think we all mostly agree on the integrity principles, but the hard part is connecting those high-level principles to the actual project-level data that is needed to back them up. So instead of reinventing the wheel, we imagine the CCDF as this connective tissue that's here to help us get the wheel rolling with a shared language for project data. And by translating all of that data into this common language, the CCDF upholds, for example, the core carbon principles that have come out of ICVCM and VCMI. It complements registry metadata like CAT Trust, And it also feeds into interoperable data formats like the Carbon Data Open Protocol or CDOP. And I'll speak a little bit more to this later on in the presentation. Next slide. So what we wanted to give the market is a very practical starting point to communicate and to assess credit quality more holistically and more confidently. So for developers, for example, it means telling a really great verified impact story and competing on data quality as the unique differentiator for their projects. For buyers, it could mean faster due diligence. For service providers, it could mean building specialized data tools where you can slice and dice data without needing to do a lot of the manual rework. And, for example, for community-based organizations, for civil society, it means transparent access to how projects and benefit sharing agreements are designed, how they're evaluated and financed. So the value of the CCDF is that it's been designed to work for anyone interacting with data in the vast crediting ecosystem. Next slide. So thanks for your attention so far in the first part of our presentation. In the next 20 minutes, I'm going to take you one level deeper into the design elements and the actual structure of the data framework. So when you're in the world of carbon data, project types, how project databases are structured, like we are at CMI, you start to notice some patterns. There are some technical patterns, some operational ones, and some are just the reality of working in this fast-moving VCM world. So, with any good, like any good systems thinkers, we too took those patterns and we used them to design the solution, the CCDF. And that's how we landed on these 4 core design principles underpinning the development of the data framework. Each of them has been crafted to address a recurring market friction. Because at the heart of it, I think there's one big data challenge. How do you bring structure to a product that's inherently diverse? So obviously, I'm talking about carbon credits. They come in all shapes and sizes, which is why there are so many different formats and definitions and reporting styles in the first place. Reconciling all of that required thinking through this idea of consistency. The CCDF has a uniform, predictable data format so that no matter who's looking at the project or where it comes from, the information is very well structured. But we also know that carbon projects are not a one-size-fits-all. Methodologies could vary, geographies matter, and projects also evolve over time as MRV and data collection tools become more sophisticated. So the CCDF is flexible by design. It adapts to different project types, to different development phases of a project, while maintaining that pretty consistent structure to make sense of all of the data coming in. The third principle includes having rich metadata and standardized labeling to make the data machine readable and searchable. We really did want the CCDF to be integrated with external systems, whether that is a scoring tool or a risk matrix or a due diligence assessment format that has been created by other folks in the VCM ecosystem. And finally, the framework also comes with some data rules that enforce this consistent logic across all of the information and data points. So that when your data, if you use the CCDF and you're plugging in some data, when you enter that data, there are fewer errors. And overall, having these data rules would ensure that project data becomes more reliable and more trustworthy. And what is the point of all of this? The point is to achieve a balance The CCDF's beauty and its value is that you can use it to really reflect the true nuance and the complexity or the uniqueness of carbon projects that you're interested in, but also have enough of a common structure so that the same data field means the same thing across the board. Next slide, please. So with those principles, the four principles as the bedrock, uh, uh, all of that I think makes comparing projects or interpreting data less of a headache. We also needed a way to organize when and how that data shows up as someone interacts with it during the crediting lifecycle. And to do that, we organized the CCDF into 4 tiers that you see here on the screen, tiers 0 to 4. This is a simple but powerful structure that lets everyone work from the same common playbook, no matter what your role is in the VCM. Each tier reflects one stage in the project development and has its own purpose. Tier 0 being early project setup, early project design, and tiers 2 and 3 being actual reporting data on how those credits are performing over time. There's a lot more information about the tier system. We do have a report that we hope you will read. What's important to communicate here is that each tier supports different types of decisions for the user. Decisions like, does this project meet the baseline requirements to be issued? That's a pretty fundamental question. That's an eligibility question. So we have that covered in the early tiers, tier 0. Or you could be wanting to make an investment decision like, is this project financially viable and is it aligned with my impact goals? So depending on who you are in the VCM, you'll see your role in a different tier in this graphic. But please, it's worth noting that you could very well zoom in and out of these different tiers based on your decision context. Are you using the CCDF to conduct due diligence or risk assessment? Are you using it to engage with socio-environmental data to do an impact evaluation? So all of that would change what tiers you might interact with. Next slide, please. So in that previous slide, we just covered how the CCDF is structured across tiers. And now I'd love to give you a preview of the depth of the CCDF. It's a very comprehensive data framework, and here's how you can think about it. The table that you see on this slide gives you a high-level overview of how data is organized. Each tier is broken down into categories and subcategories, and then finally into specific data fields. What you see on the screen here are the categories in bold and the subcategories under it. And this is how we mapped the way that data flows through the project lifecycle. So each category of information that you see in bold has multiple data points under it. This depth and granularity was quite essential. And that's what makes the data useful and actionable. And that's what really enables that full picture view of all of the activities that are associated with any carbon crediting project. So again, just want to emphasize that this is a preview, just a reference for you here. The full technical table with all of its categories, subcategories, and data fields is available in the published CCDF executive report. Next slide, please. So I wanted to end this section by first zooming in a little bit more to the most granular aspect or detail of the CCDF. And that is at the fields level, the data fields level, which is what gives the CCDF its depth and its usability. Here on the screen, we've, take tier 0, for example. You'll see 4 foundational data categories: project design, disclosures, socioeconomic due diligence, and ecological due diligence. And these foundational categories capture the essential identity and context of a project. Um, some categories of information might just require 3 or 4 data fields to cover the basics of what you need to know and what needs to be communicated, while others, like carbon accounting or uh, your monitoring, reporting, and verification plan, those can include dozens of data fields uh, that can be validated and verified. But each data field, no matter where, which category it falls under, each data field has these standardized metadata tags that ensure that the data is consistently labeled and clearly described. Um, so I wanted to pause there to say that is the zoom in to the CCDF and its structure and its depth. But what is really important to highlight, and something that we are, incredibly proud of as a component of the CCDF, is that all of the logic applies equally to carbon data as well as social, environmental, ecological, and biodiversity data. And this is something quite unique, where we really have integrated both these elements, carbon and beyond carbon. We live in a world right now where buyers and stakeholders in the VCM increasingly care about what happens beyond the carbon tons in projects. There are projects which benefit local communities, provide jobs, there's revenue sharing, we care about ecosystem health, support for underserved or marginalized communities. So all of that really matters. But in the past, those benefits have been hard to assess with data. In the CCDF, we gave socio-environmental data, or SE data, that dedicated attention. It's been designed to bring the same level of structure and rigor to SE data that we, conventionally bring to carbon data. And this point is important. Treating all of these different social environmental metrics as something that's quite core, and not an sort of optional add-on. This is a game changer. It means that you now have the ability to use a data framework like the CCDF, and it means that you can capture the full value of the ecosystems and the communities beyond the carbon aspects of credit development. And you can use it to back those SE claims with robust measurement and verification with data, to help users assess SE data into their decision-making processes as well. And next slide, please. So finally, I'd like to wrap up by looking at how the CCDF is already being used. We're so excited that it's already put to use, and giving us insights and lessons across different user applications, and also spend a moment on what's coming up next for its development. So on the slide here, you see RMI's relationship and partnership with the wonderful team at Cenegrade. Cenegrade is already using the CCDF to improve market transparency and make data-driven climate impacts easier to visualize and verify. They have already digitized the CCDF, and that's been used to showcase the climate impact of 6 million credits from 25 project types, ranging from cook stoves to DAC, or direct air capture. Next slide, please. One thing to ponder and just sort of think about is, adding one more data framework to the mix doesn't really solve the big VCM problem of standardization, right? There are there are a lot of data efforts, data initiatives, data frameworks, scoring tools, just serious folks taking data seriously because it's the core element and component of credit quality. But we wanted to apply the lessons and the insights that we've learned during the development of our CCDF, our data framework, but apply it at an ecosystem level. And the way in which we're doing that is through an active collaboration with the Carbon Data Open Protocol, or CDOP. RMI is one of the co-chairs, and CDOP is a coalition of 50 plus stakeholders who have come together to unify multiple data frameworks into one protocol. And the big sort of mission statement there is that it is to enable interoperability or data sharing in the VCM. As we know, without that one commonly accepted protocol, for carbon credit data, the VCM will continue to remain sort of disjointed and fragmented. It'll still be cumbersome to navigate, and expensive to participate in, as we've already established. So that's why, beyond just creating the CCDF, we are working with CDOP to help the carbon market agree on one common data framework, so that that kind of seamless data sharing across different networks and systems, it goes from a possibility into reality. So we're really excited about this partnership with CDOP. There's going to be another Zoom poll, the final Zoom poll. Thanks again for participating in the previous ones. Do chime in with your answers here. What would help you the most as you continue your journey? We are very interested and would be grateful to hear from you, so that it can shape how we build resources to continue trying to make the full universe of project level data visible to all stakeholders and all participants in the VCM. Next slide, please. So on Thursday this week, we are so excited. Please do join us again for our second webinar in this CCDF series, where we are going to explore how this tool, the CCDF, can surface innovation, support early stage project developers, and unlock better and faster MRV integration. We will be joined for the webinar on September 11 by Centigrade, our implementation partner, and some project developers who have already implemented this framework. It's going to be an engaging conversation around the challenges that PDs face, some data-driven solutions that the CCDF can unlock, and hopefully a wonderful conversation about how we can move the market toward interoperable systems. And then next month in October, we also have a webinar dedicated to the social and environmental portion of the CCDF toolkit. As I'd mentioned earlier, the CCDF embeds these SE considerations directly into the framework as core benefits. And we truly believe they are central to a project's design, its delivery, and its long-term success. So do join us for that conversation too. We will be sharing details in the coming weeks. Next slide, please. So to close out, let's come back to that core bet that we had started with. If we standardize project level data, we can cut transaction costs and build these data-backed systems in the VCM, build that trust in project data, in project quality, and accelerate the finance flows into high integrity projects that are in the VCM's supply pipeline. That is what the CCDF is here to do. And this is an open and flexible and evolving effort. So we do invite you to stay connected with us. It would be awesome to test out the toolkit against your needs, against the kinds of work that you are doing in the VCM, and let us know how it works for you. If you see opportunities to build on this work, spot areas for refinement, or you simply just are curious and want to explore how we can support your efforts, we'd love to hear from you. So please do reach out. And with that, next in our final slide, thanks again, all of you, for being here on this webinar with us, for being part of this conversation. We are just kicking off here. We hope that, this short and sweet, I hope, presentation gives you a useful window into what's possible when we treat carbon data, climate data, SE data as a shared infrastructure. And with that, I will hand it to Bonnie to take us into Q&A.
Thank
Thank
you
you.
so much, Apurva, for sharing the carbon crediting data framework with the entire audience. So as promised, I mentioned in chat that we are now going to be at the end of the webinar, moving into a live Q&A session. So we've been already collecting great questions from all of the audience throughout the presentation. If any other questions are coming up for you now, please use that Q&A function to be able to submit your question, and we'll be able to help answer them live together with Apurva and Caitlin, our presenters today. So continue to use that function. I'll be checking all of that to make sure that we have a chance to see your question through that Q&A function. So in the meantime, we already got some great questions that were submitted. So Apurva, Caitlin, excited to be able to engage directly with you guys on the audience questions now. So the first question, perhaps Apurva, you could help us handle this one. Our audience would love to hear a little bit more about how do you actually plan to align the CCDF with these other VCM initiatives that you mentioned? How would you be collaborating with these groups? Do the users actually need to adopt and track all of these multiple different frameworks? And is there a way that CCDF could actually help with streamlining that process?
Yeah. Thanks for that, Bonnie. Yeah, I think it feels perfectly natural to wonder what are the nodes and the points of connection across these different, there's a whole constellation of VCM initiatives out there in the market. And the CCDF has been designed upfront from the beginning, the last 2 years, as I was mentioning, that we really did want this to be something that's compatible with the other market-wide initiatives. The way in which we sort of have a slightly unique take is that we are sitting at the project level data as compared to maybe high-level market principles or at the methodology level. We very much squarely sit in the project level. So as a lot of you might know, ICVCM with their core carbon principles, they sit at like a methodology level. So you can interact with the CCPs. They're great resources to align with the ICVCM, VCMI principles. But when you start to work with data at the project level, you can use the CCDF as the sort of connective tissue, taking things from the methodology into the project level. I also mentioned a little early on about the wonderful and active collaboration we have with CDOP, the Carbon Data Open Protocol. So we're actively collaborating with them. It is sort of the interoperability side of things. Once we have all of this great data, this structured, digitized data, how does it move and flow across an ecosystem? So that's sort of a more direct integration piece we have. And with all of these other initiatives, it's sort of taking their strengths, and then as you come to the project level, the most granular level, that's where you can play with the CCDF and plug it in at that granular level. So yeah, the report too outlines all of the various initiatives that we've mentioned in this presentation. The report also outlines more details on how actively, what are the points of connection across these initiatives. So again, just do encourage you to read the report to get a little bit more information on some of those collaborations and some of those active sort of relationships across these different initiatives.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for that additional clarity, Apurva. This other question that we received, Caitlin, I'll pose this one to you. How do you plan to drive adoption of CCDF with existing players in the VCM? So thinking about tooling with registries, ratings agencies, and DMRV providers.
Yeah, that's a great question. especially because it gets to the core of, the market does not need more reports that live in PDFs, and kind of tackle abstract questions. We are taking kind of a multi-pronged approach to this. So as Apoorva mentioned, we have our implementing partner Centigrade, who has definitely, who has kind of digitized this and is using this framework to help projects display their data and get it in front of market actors. They're partnering with kind of a whole range of actors. And we'll hear a lot more about that in our webinar on Thursday, because Centigrade will be helping us there, and we'll get a lot of use cases on that implementation. Through CDOP, as kind of Apoorva mentioned, the Carbon Data Open Protocol is a coalition of more than 50 members who are all who have all agreed that the market needs a standard schema, and we need a shared language for being able to understand and exchange data. And RMI is co-chairs of the technical working group for the Carbon Data Open Protocol. We have taken this data framework. It is one of the inputs into the CDOT process. And then we are taking kind of all of the knowledge and experience we've learned about designing this framework and our work really in building consensus and kind of developing coalitions to build consensus and kind of harmonize the different crediting approaches. And and for those of you who will be at New York Climate Week, CDOP will launch its first set of pre-issuance data under the CDOP schema. Right now they're aligned, and then as CDOP continues to evolve, we will kind of keep updating our data framework to ensure that there's consensus across the two. And then beyond that, we're really, we developed this through a lot of research and consultation and feedback, but we've also learned that the best way to get it used and implemented is to continue to have conversations and understand where it does help and where it does not help. And so we are constantly, we're constantly talking with, and we're very keen to have more conversations with those who are interested in understanding how this works, or even providing feedback on where it could be better. So I think Bonnie will drop our email in the chat, and we would love your thoughts, or to meet with you either on Zoom or in New York as time allows, and talk about how implementation works best.
Fantastic. Thanks for that, Caitlin. And this actually ties really well into this next question we received, which is about how will the CCDF be updated, and what is the process for incorporating new data fields or methodologies as the market continues to evolve? And we know the voluntary carbon market and carbon markets in general are constantly evolving. Apoorva, can you help address this one?
Of course, fantastic question. So what we're really excited about with the release of this public CCDF product and toolkit is that it is an open source product, and we are really curious to explore this format where we bring in the community, the VCM community, who are also doing so much interesting work and exciting work to build unique sort of tools and specialized tools and products. So I think it's the GitHub repository. It's this public page where we really wanted to set this up to be an open-ended feedback mechanism loop, where we invite your feedback and invite your thoughts and comments in sort of real time. And from those inputs that we get, the feedback and the thoughts that you share with us on how to refine, how to, make this thing better, or maybe even highlight, here are my very specific pain points from my vantage point, and this is how the CCDF can, sort of become bigger and better to accommodate those user needs. So the open source component of this is quite important to really capture the evolving and shifting user needs. And also recognizing that the VCM is a very fast-paced world. It's sort of this it's been described as a nascent market, an imperfect market, and we are moving towards a more sort of sophisticated, elegant VCM. So just recognizing how things move and shake in this market, news from even a week ago sometimes can feel like old news. So I think what we are committed to is really keeping track of the input and the feedback in this evolving ecosystem, and then use that as the way to release a new version. And part of our role as stewards of the CCDF is to really sort of keep track of those things and continue to sort of release these newer public versions as time unfolds. Yeah, I think our goal here is to stay open-minded, stay nimble, and adapt and update based on what's happening in your little worlds in the VCM, and also the wider context of a shifting, evolving VCM itself.
That sounds great. And yeah, really taking advantage of the collective power of the community here with something like an open source product to be able to do that broader system sensing and make sure that we're responding very rapidly to changes and making sure that this continues to stay a relevant and useful data framework. That's great. Awesome. So now we're getting some questions that want to understand a little bit more about how we actually design the CCDF. So Caitlin, here's a question that says, we talked about how the CCDF was built using more than 160 different sources, and we'll love to hear a little bit more about how we actually chose those sources and how exactly we actually ended up using them and integrating them into what is ultimately the CCDF now.
Yeah, phenomenal question. So we did not anticipate initially that we would need 160 sources. I will just say that up front. The kind of origin of this was we started with the existing think of them as like the institutional documents. So the registry requirements, the kind of existing initiatives that have been stood up to standardize and help tokenize carbon crediting data. We use that as a skeleton. And that helped us get kind of like a core structure together to understand what is required for projects, mostly on the carbon side, to be honest. And that got into kind of greenhouse gas accounting, that got into uh, disclosure, credibility issues. But then we realized that just the registry documents left a lot of gaps in terms of where quality debates get really complicated, where impact is most important to get measured, or even where kind of due diligence questions can get tripped up or can arise. And so then we started casting a wider net to fold in the best practices and data that come from the climate finance, the development space, which includes a lot of safeguards. I saw in the chat there's a second question, so I'll segue here a little bit. That the social environmental framework, we mentioned it is very integral to our framework. The reason for that is credit quality and project design are really inseparable from, like, you need high quality, well-designed social environmental impacts and practices to get to a high quality carbon project. This is most essential in the durability space, but it is increasingly kind of the norm when we talk to buyers. And it's a space where the data on the carbon side is very complicated. The kind of standard data on the social environmental side is a nightmare, straight up. And so actually we're about to release a whole separate toolkit just on that. We'll do a webinar on that specifically in October. So we'll talk again in a month if you want to go in more detail. But the kind of short version there is that the social environmental side is incredibly important to get right. It's very hard to get right. And it does not have the same kind of breadth of existing frameworks that help projects understand both what is the minimum do no harm safeguard practices they need for a good project, and then what is the best practice they should be implementing to really demonstrate how much impact, positive impact their projects are driving on the ground. And so effectively over time, we ended up taking the best available research, most of it publicly available, some of it, I think all of it actually publicly available, on what is expected from project developers, how can they be designing their projects, what can they be reporting to the registries or buyers or ratings agencies on how their projects are performing, and then expanding that to include the full range of impacts that projects can have. And this is really where that number started to increase, where you have kind of project essential pieces like project location and due diligence, but then you also have some projects have huge air pollution impacts, some projects have huge biodiversity impacts, some projects have huge gender impacts. And so we really kind of kept expanding the scope to draw the boundary, again, the universe of data that could come with a carbon project. We wanted to make this framework as inclusive as possible. And then the synthesis came in separating what projects are asked to provide and then trying to drill into how they're providing that information and what is the format of the answer. And that was where a lot of the sausage making work occurred.
That's great. Thanks so much for giving us a peek behind the curtain, Caitlin, of how we actually got to the nitty-gritty of being able to design and create the CCDF. And again, for folks who are interested in going a little bit deeper, we do have within the CCDF report online a lot more detail about the exact sources and how we actually did that process of being able to create the CCDF. So you could always look there if you're interested in going a little bit deeper into the methodology that we used. Fantastic. Here is a comment that I think possibly a lot of our audience members could resonate with. Apurva, I'll pose this question to you. This audience member mentioned that they are a small team and they do not actually have any in-house technical people. And so when they are looking at something like a very data-heavy, technical-heavy CCDF, they want to understand better, like, how can we actually use this?
Yeah, fantastic question. And I like the small team user orientation here. We really wanted to make the CCDF widely useful for all user types, for all user needs. Sometimes that's a task that's hard to achieve, but we really when it's up front and center in the very design of it. Hopefully we will be able to reach you too, and you can use the CCDF. So one way in which we tried to make this widely accessible, whether you're a big team or a small team, have in-house specialized capabilities or not, we've released this in multiple formats. So the 4-part CCDF toolkit was an attempt to reach a technical audience, a broad non-technical audience. We're also always looking for more ways to make this more accessible. And so if you, come talk to us, basically, if you have other ideas. The initial investment, I think, that our team made to build these different formats came from the knowledge that we really do expect users to come from different places, from different sort of pain points, and we really wanted to be very empathetic to the different pain points of different users in the system. So, we are going to continue to, at RMI, at the Carbon Markets Initiative, continue to think about how best to support you and your goals using the CCDF. Please get in touch with our team. I know there's an email in chat that you can use here, but there are other ways to get in touch with us. We are so happy to talk to you about all the ways in which we can make this more rigorous, more accessible. Tell us about the ways that you interact and engage with data, right, in this vast, like, carbon crediting data ecosystem. And we'd love to collectively think through, our conversations with you, how we can make this, just form more connections around the CCDF and make the tools, the future tools that we release around it more user-friendly. So again, come talk to us. And also on Thursday, we have this fantastic webinar with Centigrade and our project developers. So that is sort of an external perspective from you hear from the voices of folks who have already implemented and used the CCDF. So I think that would be a great learning space to kind of get a little bit of from the horse's mouth of just how the CCDF can be applied in different contexts. So yeah, get in touch, attend our webinar, and we are really we're eager and excited to really make this user friendly and accessible to the broadest group of people.
Fantastic. And I was going to say, we have another question here that I think your answer, Apurva, really helps address as well. So someone wanted to understand, how do we actually see a demo of the CCDF application? And so again, to be able to see the use cases and walk through some of those examples, please do join us either live on Thursday, or we could share out a recording afterwards as well. That's where we'll go into a lot more of the nitty-gritty of how to actually use the CCDF. And if after that you have more questions about how you yourself could actually utilize and implement, please get in touch with us at carbonmarkets@rmi.org. That's going to be our opportunity to be able to work more directly with you and understand what you need and what components are going to be most helpful to actually help you put this into practice. So we have time for one more question. Caitlin, I'll kick this over to you. And someone wants to understand a little bit better. So is it fair to say that the CCDF helps platforms standardize data, but does not necessarily remove paywalls to access the standardized data itself?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think it gets to one of the many core frustrations on the data side. The reality is it really depends on what paywall data you're talking about. Across the board, we set out to kind of take the guidance that currently exists, that is publicly available, or that projects kind of need to comply with as they go through the registry process. We have learned in a lot of, and that is the core of, that's the 160 resources are all publicly available. We did have multiple consultations with a lot of market actors who do have their own proprietary ways of assessing data or kind of expectations on how data is asked. And we've gotten their feedback on the consultation. And so we kind of have a confidence that the framework is very comprehensive and gets very close. But we, for intellectual property reasons, like we also are not pulling information that lives behind somebody else's paywall and making it publicly available. I think it is part of the theory of a kind of the CDOP schema or Centigrade or these different data framework initiatives is that if you have increased transparency on what information can be standardized and what people can be asking for, it's easier to move, easier for people to take information and frameworks that are very effective and publicly available and use them as their starting point to get information or to provide information. And that hopefully will reduce the need for kind of the black box method of data collection over time. But that is not the problem we set out to solve, unfortunately, in this case. And then I think I saw one, Bonnie, I'll answer the other question about kind of the quality, how are you working with the exchanges to incorporate high value differentiators of the social environment economic factors. This is a great question. Very quickly, I mentioned we're about to release kind of just the SC toolkit, which it's in this data framework Apurva discussed. We are putting it out as a kind of focused toolkit because we have had a lot of conversations with ratings agencies and marketplaces and project developers and market actors about how they want to be better on the social environmental side. And so once we release the toolkit, we will have further conversations and take on that implementation piece. The theory being, again, this standardized framework can help really accelerate how quickly the market can offer ways for credits to compete just on the impact of their social environmental components. That will come out next week, and then we'll have another webinar on it in October. So we would love to see you then and hear your feedback as it comes.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much to our audience for joining us today. This is unfortunately all the time that we have for this first introductory webinar. And I know we didn't even get to all of the questions, but I saw some great questions about wanting to understand Centigrade and use cases a little bit better. So again, do join us this Thursday to be able to hear a little bit more about that, and continue to contact us if you want to be able to get a deeper dive from there. And we will have this next release very soon next week on the social environmental components of the data framework. So there's more to come. We're excited to start the CCDF webinar series with you, and we look forward to being able to share more and getting to engage with all of you as we're building out this really rich and robust open source community around the CCDF. So thanks again, everyone, for tuning in. We hope to hear from you guys and be able to see you online very soon this Thursday.